Jeff Neiman and Greg Rassier are with us today. Jeff Neiman is the CEO of MediWit, and he is leading a top-notch team of professionals that are focused on maximizing performance and accelerating growth within MediWit's line of services. Jeff is an experienced executive in healthcare revenue cycle management, call center management, and insurance claims processing operations. Most recently, before Jeff took over at MediWit, he was the Chief Operating Officer for Navigant's Symetrics, which is a revenue cycle management company serving over 200 hospitals. Jeff has also been a leader at Conifer Health Solutions, at Humana, and HCA, and he has his bachelor's in economics from Bellarmine University in Louisville, Kentucky, where he graduated magna cum laude. Greg Rassier is the COO with MediWit, and he began in 2019 where he took over the responsibilities for overseeing the company's day-to-day operations. Greg brings a wealth of experience as a revenue cycle strategist, executive, and consultant, and he's very focused on design, implementation, and transformation of the healthcare revenue cycle and call center solutions. He's an expert in creating process efficiency and partnering with customers to provide industry-leading revenue cycle solutions. He has over 25 years of experience in operations, process management, technology-driven automation, mergers and acquisitions, organizational assessment, and consulting. And he has held many leadership roles with Convergent and Conifer Health Solutions. He also has his bachelor's in economics from Washington State University. And gentlemen, we want to thank you on behalf of the entire team at FHA. We want to thank you for leading our discussion today. And Jeff, I'll turn the webinar over to you to get started. Thank you.
Great, John. Thanks for the very kind introduction there. I'll just reiterate, Greg and I have both spent a pretty significant portion of our careers on the provider side, actually managing revenue cycle for large hospital systems. Myself for HCA and Tenet, Greg at Tenet, which is where the two of us originally met. And really a good portion here at the latter part of our careers on the vendor side has been, working with providers to help them implement successful revenue cycles, both just by sharing thought leadership with our customers and colleagues as well as providing solutions, which we'll discuss further today. So, as John said, we're here to really talk about best practices around resolving aged accounts. I'm going to give a quick overview here of MediWit, and then Greg will talk about kind of really best practice in working accounts as well as a little bit of a case study, and then we'll move on to some other automation within the revenue cycle. So just a quick overview, who is MediWit? We currently operate across 9 offices. Those are the shaded states is where we have different office locations here. And then, everywhere you see kind of a little orange pin, if you will, in the map is where we have existing customers today. The company manages about $25 billion a year in total AR, most of that being back office solutions, but certainly in recent years we've moved upstream into areas like pre-registration and coding and things as well. We've got about 850 total hospitals and large physician practices that we work with, 60,000 physicians supported on the platform, and around 1,400 employees, many of whom, actually the overwhelming majority of whom at this point in time work from home, believe it or not in one of our 9 offices. So I'm sure everybody's felt our challenges around that with COVID, but it's kind of the new world we're living in and probably going to live in going forward. The only other thing I'll point out here is MediWit's company is very focused on partnerships with our customers, our hospital and physician customers. We do not come in and take over revenue cycle. That's not our model. Our model is to partner and figure out where our customers can leverage us. And through a series of handoffs, back and forth in the AR, we can partner to overall drive a better outcome at a lower total cost. Evidence of that, I think if you're familiar with Net Promoter Scores, we do have a 68 Net Promoter Score. Those scores range on a scale of -100 to +100. So just to give you a sense, a 68 is on par with organizations that you're familiar with like Ritz-Carlton, Costco, Apple Computer, organizations that have very high touch, high satisfaction, and a focus on service. Again, this next slide here just shows the scope of the services that we provide. We provide solutions in all the little orange boxes on there, but we're very heavy. We do really all things build, drop, on the back end, and then some front-end solutions like scheduling, pre-registration, and things that I mentioned. We've also made a pretty big entry into artificial intelligence-controlled robotic process automation. You'll hear me refer to that just to truncate it as AI and RPA through the rest of the discussion here. But we will talk about that at the end and how we're deploying those tools internally and with customers to help them improve productivity and improve using data analytics and business intelligence and things to get smarter, if you will, about how they work their AR. So where are we today? Obviously, we're in a major changing environment given COVID, right? I think COVID has sort of started to blow up the old model of managing your revenue cycle. I would say everybody I'm talking to at this point is really rethinking, not how do we get back to how we did things before. Nobody's saying that. What people are saying is, how do we get to a new, better way of managing the revenue cycle and doing things than we did in the past? We've seen obviously the huge increases in remote work that I've talked about, right? There's probably never going to be a time where people are coming back to the office, at least in the same way that they used to be. And if they do, it's going to be a different office spacing and a different environment and things like that. And that's starting to spur on people really thinking about what's our core competency and what should we be doing, and how do we create more flexible staffing models where we can partner with vendors for overflow or things that we're not able to get to and staff to and things. And really, at the end of the day, how do we prepare for the next crisis? So whether that's a second round of COVID or another pandemic in the future or something else, right? Could even be a natural disaster in a local area. How do we create models that are much more flexible and capable of withstanding those types of crises in the future? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and he'll walk through here kind of the best practices that we would recommend around working aged accounts. How do you determine when you want to engage a vendor, and some of that information.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. So again, why are we here today? Obviously, we want to talk just a little bit about, from our perspective, trying to be very consultative in nature and partner with our clients versus just being a vendor. It's trying to talk a little bit about the facts. Obviously, we're going to talk mostly today about the aged insurance accounts and what we see as far as impact, opportunities, or as we like to call it, problem-tunities internally, and really what's going on. As we all know, as accounts age, the probability of collecting declines. It's not just getting pushed off to a later date to be collected. The liquidity of that obviously drops over time and very radically, as I'm sure most people know, with specific type of payers at specific age breaks. And we want to talk about a proactive approach to those aged accounts and how critical that can be. Obviously, as we're looking at, talking with our providers, we've always had processes and protocols. I know when I first jumped into the provider side many years ago, we had processes and protocols that said we would work every aged account over 120 days, every 30 days. And being somewhat new into that world, my first step was to go get the data. And that would be, kind of one of those first recommendations. We had these processes and protocols in place that said we were going to do X. And when I looked at it, I was actually relatively shocked at what percentage of accounts were really being touched on a consistent basis, especially as we dove into where are the problems, where do we lack subject matter expertise and resources against that business. And so obviously kind of what we want to cover today a bit is just What are the best practices for achieving maximum cash flow? Is the AR every 30 days the right number? Is that the prescription? Is it less than that based on additional levels of scoring and segmentation and analytics and uses of technologies like AI and RPA? Are there a significant number of specific payers or buckets of claims that should get worked in different time zones, time spans? Are there different groups of business that need different levels of specialized resources? So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about the guidance on when to potentially outsource aged accounts to find additional levels of specialization. Talk a little bit about a case study and some of the data that came out of that in recent times, and also a little bit on the best practices for predictive analytics and robotic process automation as we're talking about the insurance information. So again, as we know from experience and also in dealing with our 850 plus hospitals and 60,000 plus physicians, why is it that the hospitals specifically and physicians are leaving unresolved accounts untouched? And obviously the top four are staffing, the shortfalls there, the budget constraints about being able to add enough resources to be able to get through the business. And honestly, some of that is prioritization. Are we working the biggest balances and the newest balances first, and there's not enough time at the end of the day to work through the rest of it? Influx in patient volumes, and then obviously environmental impacts like COVID that have an impact on both your resources and also, just the volume. Volumes may be significantly low. As they ramp back up again, are you going to be able to ramp the staff back up to match those things? There's some other outliers, obviously, that cause issues, contract issues with payers and conversions and things like that. But these are, especially over more recent 6 to 12 months, maybe the top issues that we hear from our client base today. So back into the facts. In the world that we all live with today, unworked accounts we know will age out. They'll be less collectible over time. The work efforts tend to get duplicated, primarily when accounts lapse a period of time without being worked. Agents have to go back in, restart some of those processes. It's not as simple as just picking up where the person left off the last event. And eventually, obviously, the bigger concern is they'll just be written off to bad debt at the end, and obviously those net results are what we're all concerned with. As we start to take a deeper look, is what are the tips? What are our guidelines? Identifying, getting the data, which is a very important key to these exercises. Identify what percentage of your AR worked in the last 30 days and what the results are. What I would say, being an operator and spending enough time in this, the analytics and the analysis of this, it's probably being able to then segment and understand what is being touched, and is that the right business to be touched, and what isn't being touched and why, and being able to categorize that for analysis. And so being able to then really have a good handle on what we'll talk about here in a second is the breakdown of those major categories. And then obviously the key piece then is being able to calculate the specific payer-based, the bucketing, and the results and the timing. That's what really ties into the subject matter expertise, putting the right expertise and resources on the business, and as we talked about, at the right time is really where we're trying to go with this conversation. In the AR resolution world, there is just the concept of working highest balances to lowest balances because of their net impact per account basis, not necessarily how easy it is to resolve an account per touch and what that value looks like. So that's not a huge surprise. Denied accounts in there, pretty good number. Aged accounts, obviously the reason we're having the call and the reason why people have joined this conversation is because of the problems we have with aged inventory. Small difficult payers, a small piece of that. So I think that that definitely gets us what was anticipated and where we were leading with this. From an expectation standpoint, small balance kind of always at the top, denied and aged are in there, and then there are obviously some smaller, very specific issues with miscellaneous and difficult payers that no matter where you're at, you know those top 2 or 3 payers every year that are going to give you the biggest hassles. So again, from an opportunity standpoint, being able to take the problems of those unworked accounts, what are the opportunities then to be able to solve? What does that bring? If you can get the right subject matter expertise, the right analysis and resources to resolve those problems, you can get quick cash generation, you can get high return versus the cost of outsourcing, or what we consider when we have discussions of netback. And that for us, we spend a significant amount of time with peers, with C-suite, with revenue cycle leaders, just talking about netback, because the cost basis to get more business office staff to be able to hire an outsourced vendor to be able to go buy the technology and the analytics, all those cost bases have to be measured against what's my return, what's my ROI, and that's really what we try to talk through when we're looking at different opportunities. Again, we do a lot of consultative conversations with clients. It's not always about outsourcing business to us. It's what are your different opportunities? What can you do within that revenue cycle to be able to improve? What would you need to do internally to manage it? What are the pieces where we could plug in? What other things should you be thinking about? So it's trying to change the revenue cycle from that pure pitch it over the fence vendor to a consultative partnership. That's what makes long-term success for everybody, and that's really what we're all about here. And then obviously the requiring specialized expertise for resolution. The trickier you get, going back to working small balance, denied accounts, aged accounts, very tricky issues. They're not like the same business office account. A $10,000 day 15, day 30 account is very different than resolving a denied account that's 170 days old. And so you do have to think about putting specialized resources against that business. As we look at the collectability of AR, this is somewhat of a leading edge conversation into talking a little bit about the case study. This was some analysis we've done across a good portion of the business. You'll see the 2 different shades, the darker shade being the lower end of the range and the lighter shade being kind of more of the higher range of this. These are facts that I think everybody is relatively aware of. Looking at what is the collectability of the aged AR as it truly ages out, and when you get to that 180 day, that pitfall, when you get to that 365 day, the pitfall off of those liquidities, specifically with payers that are tied to that. So being able to get the resources earlier in the process and tying back to the fact that not working accounts isn't a delay in getting the cash. It's more likely cash that will just turn into bad debt. It's not a dollar that we're just pushing down the hill for 60 days. It's money we will just lose. So again, circling back on the tips and recommendations, identify by payer segments when to work accounts, minimum every 30 days, data and analytics, trying to take action via segmentation, get the right set of payers and balances, age buckets and type of business, then find the right subject matter experts to assign to those appropriate buckets, and outsource to the accounts that aren't getting worked in that time period. Basically, if you don't have all the subject matter experts and resources you need, a generalist that does most of your major lift in the business office may not have the same expertise needed to resolve some of these problems accounts. Go find yourself subject matter experts that do nothing but this on a larger scale to be able to supplement your resources and make sure you partner with them to really identify that net back. What is the return on investment that you're looking for in this business? So a bit about the case study that we're going to talk about briefly today. It was a mid-sized regional hospital. They were definitely under-resourced in that business office. The staff was only being able to work about 2% of the accounts once they reached 120-plus days. They were stuck in with clearance, with edits, coding. They were just trying to get accounts freed out of the billing process. They had gone through a system conversion maybe a year before that and were still struggling with being able to just get enough resources to resolve their problems. So at the time, they were liquidating about 15% of their business for about $300,000 a month. What we were doing, the plan, which is obviously a very common one, was take the accounts when they hit the 120 days, outsource them to us. We would obviously use our technology and analytics and be able to use that, run through the business, do proper segmentation. We are able to then segment the work effort by age, payer, claim type, and then able to use our resources to divide and conquer on the business. The result is in the first 30 days, we were able to work 53% of the accounts. So obviously we had the ability to lift additional resources, get in there, make the first touch on that business, get the accounts moving, be able to categorize what needed to be done to resolve them. Within the 60-day period of time, of the 53% we worked in that first month, we were able to resolve 79% of those accounts within the second month. Within 90 days of it, we had increased their cash by 5x to up to $1.5 million per month. That is a pretty significant effort. And again, as we talk about this, services aren't free for outsourcing, nor is it going and hiring a bunch of business office staff. So in this case, we always talk about the subject matter experts and the net back, the lift in those collections, the net of fees, which is the net back baseline of being able to deliver a significant ROI to that hospital. The total return post the initial cleanup project and things, the total return was $1 million per month for them. And without the outsourcing efforts, a majority of that business would have been written off. Basically, the net differential of what we collected versus what they were collecting today, a very high percentage of that would have had to been written off to bad debt. So kind of the last set of tips, again, not to beat this stuff over the head, but it really is all about trying to generate specialization, to being able to identify that segmentation, heavy with analytics, being able to get the right account in front of the right subject matter expert at the right time, never too soon, never too late, and that takes the right expertise, the right data, the right process flows and technology behind it. The engagement of an outside revenue cycle expert, and the reason why we obviously try to press our value prop is that we are able to get the right expertise and technology and investment dollars that maybe not every provider has the capacity to because of the money wanting to go back into the hospital and clinics and physician practices to ensure that we're treating patients. We want to try to be able to generate and maximize that reimbursement before we're lost to bad debt. And then obviously being able to take it to the next step in the revenue cycle world, which is being able to advance the analytics into the AI-based solutions and being able to actually work a higher percentage of the AR and get more of the tech to drive performance to be able to keep up with the investment that the payers are putting into their solutions on the other side. So a bit of a counter to payers' processes and those types of things. Not everybody can work every account every 30 days. So to that point, some potential addition solutions that we use internally as well with our partners to try to drive some additional performance. I'll turn it back to Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So just to kind of reiterate or recap a little bit, I think some key points that Greg made there were, one, I know when we went back years ago and looked in our internal operation and said, we thought we were working accounts every 30 days, but were we really? When we pulled the analytics, we quickly discovered that we weren't. But knowledge is power, and so the data that we pulled showed us where we weren't getting accounts worked and allowed us to refocus staff, reprioritize work queues, all those kind of things to improve, if you will, our work effort. And just having focus on it got us a lift in cash collections just by managing that in-house, not necessarily even adding resources, just being knowledgeable of where those gaps and those opportunities existed. The other thing obviously is you can leverage outsourcing. That is an option. I think we, displayed that there's net back opportunity there many times that's getting left on the table. And our experience is, sometimes people say, oh, that's just a cash flow issue, right? I'm eventually going to get to these and get them collected. And so no sense in paying a vendor because 90 days from now, I'm still going to pick up those dollars. That's candidly not what we've seen happen. It sounds really good, but the reality is you never get to them. And every 30 to 60 days that goes by, I sort of refer to it as a half-life, right? So every 30 to 60 days that go by, an account's worth about half of what it was 30 to 60 days prior. So you genuinely are losing opportunity to collect AR because insurance companies are less likely to reprocess. They're going to be harder to work with. Somebody's going to give up eventually if they make it hard enough for you to try to collect it, and they hope that's you giving up, right? So getting resources on these things sooner definitely pays off and has a overall positive ROI. So now we want to launch into the next section of this, right? So obviously engaging vendors costs money. Are there other ways that are kind of cost neutral or low cost ways for you to really be able to again, get smarter about how you work your AR and focus on things. And I think as we launch into this section, I'll kind of go back to where I started the conversation today, which is we should all be looking for an opportunity here to see COVID as a disruptive moment in the revenue cycle, right? We can't go back to the old way of doing things. So how do we take advantage of this kind of unfortunate phenomenon to say we're going to show up differently tomorrow and better, and that's what we kind of launch into here with some of these tools. And so I'll mention very quickly, we use these tools in-house on our insurance AR for anything that we're working with in MediWit, but these tools are also commercially available to any customers that are interested in using them as well. So just want to explain kind of what they are and how they work, and certainly these are not the only tools in the marketplace. There's plenty of competition out there with similar products and services available. So a tool that we call MedProof Payer. What is that? It's essentially just advanced analytics that's determining the best accounts to work and the best times to work those accounts, right? It's predictive analytics, for lack of a better term. It does also, along with that, there's an opportunity to utilize, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here, but let me spend one more second on this slide. So what this tool does is a variety of things. One, it can tell you the ideal time to work accounts. So back to kind of the question Greg asked earlier, the survey that we did, it's a bit of a loaded question, and I get, the spirit of which everybody's answering it in, but how often are you working your accounts, right? Is it every 7 days? Is it every 30 days? What is it? The right answer to that question really should be as often as I need to work them. And so we're using 30 days as kind of an arbitrary baseline that just kind of says most accounts shouldn't go more than 30 days without some sort of touch or some sort of work effort based on our experience. But Greg and I can tell you, we've had payers that we don't work for 45 days after we drop the bill. Or there's other payers that we know that if the claim isn't paid within 14 days, there's a problem, and so we're teeing anything that's not paid in 14 days up on day 17 for a work effort. So predictive analytics and MedProof Payer, for example, could help analyze your AR payer by payer, claim type by claim type. It can look very granularly at what is the average cycle time from bill submission to adjudication for that payer, that claim type, that balance size, et cetera, and tell you the ideal time to follow up on a claim. so that you're not saying, oh, we're going to work everything every 7 days and overworking your inventory unnecessarily to just get the standard response of, yep, claim on file. Conversely, right, you don't want to let things sit out there too long, and so it tells you, hey, with this payer it's 21 days, with this payer it's 28 days. It gives you a time frame to work things. The other thing that predictive analytics has the capability of doing is determining a value or a theoretical value for accounts. So back to kind of Greg's case study example, one of the things we're able to do with aged inventory is go into it and score it and say, based on the status of the claim, based on the payer, based on the history of that payer's denial rates, things of that nature, when was the last action taken on the account, we can look at those kind of things and then use predictive analytics to say which accounts have the highest net value or probability of being collected, right? So then we can tee it up where we're going to work a, $20,000 account ahead of, that has a decent probability of being collected over maybe even a $50,000 or $100,000 account that has an extremely low probability of getting collected at that point in time. So just, using those types of analytics to determine collectability of your AR and timing of when to follow up can really help you distribute your resources more effectively and get a higher net yield by doing more with your existing resources than what you're able to just using kind of an older, time-driven type of work philosophy. All right, the other option really out there today that's becoming more and more prevalent and that we're seeing more and more people interested in every day is utilizing automated solutions to leverage artificial intelligence and do the work that humans used to do in the revenue cycle, right? So a combination of AI and RPA. I think AI is probably the most misused term out there right now. But without me going down a rabbit hole there, I'll just say generally that I think most people see AI or would call AI anything that replaces a human work effort. And so we are starting to see the active deployment throughout the revenue cycle of tools that are capable of replacing work that people used to do. All right, so I want to talk a minute about a tool that we have that's called SARA. So we have launched SARA. It simply stands for Supervised Autonomous Revenue Associate. Sarah is our most productive employee. She never calls in sick. She never fails to meet her production goals in a day. She always has 100% quality, and if she doesn't, it's our fault because we trained her or programmed her to do the wrong thing. So, we've launched this internally within our own operation. We're deploying it at a large regional multi-hospital system as well. But really what it can do is provide actionable information that's not typically available in a claim status. So typically if you're, submitting claims through a clearinghouse, you have the capability of doing EDI interfaces and you're getting some sort of 276, 277, and 835 data, right? You're getting 277s and 835s back from the payer through your clearinghouse that are telling you the status of the claim or are telling you how they adjudicated the claim. And you can then take action on that. So where SARA comes in is when we don't get good information from those transaction sets. And I'll give an example. We've got one particular hospital where I think 40% of the responses that they get back in 277 format are generic in nature, meaning they're so generic we have no idea based on the response we got what to do next with the account. So there's a manual effort then that has to be engaged in. You either have to go out on the website to do a claim check, you have to call the insurance company, you have to do something to figure out how to get that claim resolved. So, how do we circumvent that process? How do we bridge that gap? And that's where SARA comes into play here. So what SARA has the capability of doing is pulling information from the host patient accounting system, whatever that is, Epic, Cerner, Meditech, pick any other system, right? It can pull the basic lookup information. It can parse the claim out, retrieve the information from the payer website, meaning so SARA on her own can go out, log into the payer website, take all the account information, find the account on the payer website, determine why the account isn't paid, screen scrape the payer website, and turn around and dump those findings back into the notes of the host patient accounting system. So that's the simplest step. Is now you don't have to go in and log in claim by claim and spend your labor hours that are very valuable in trying to get these claims resolved doing that just basic copy and paste activity, right? So once you remove that, you're able to log into the system, pull up an account, already see what was on the payer website, and take the action. We can also see claim rejections. You get error details documented in the note file. So anything that's basically available out on the payer website, we can copy and pull down. And these are all custom-built solutions. So if there's something more you want, you just go out and program the web bot, if you will, to pull more information and dump it into the patient accounting system. So the other piece of this, I guess, is that we can also script, if it's an obvious answer, the ability to work the account. Meaning, so let's say it's a simple thing like no claim on file. So Sarah goes out, pulls up on Blue Cross the information that says no claim on file. We can, as long as it's a repetitive process that can be automated, we can program Sarah to go back into Cerner, for example, and redrop a bill to the payer with no human intervention ever getting engaged in that. Or if Sarah needs to forward the account to a clinical review, for example, because they're saying that you've coded the claim wrong, instead of having a person have to look at the notes and figure that out and do it, as long as we can determine that from the information on the payer website, Sarah can apply that code within Meditech, for example, and send it back to coding for review. So just to give you a sense for the scope of this, again, we've deployed it internally here. It's been up and running for about 60 days, and for the last 60 days, Sarah has done the work of 12 employees. So she's simply going out, pulling data off of the payer website, putting it in our system, and actioning it when she can, so when she can figure it out. Now, where the AI component comes in is that over time, Sarah starts to learn that, hey, I've seen this same thing from the payer website 150 times, and all 150 times, the employee came in and read the note and pushed, this function key and applied this result code. And once Sarah says that happened exactly the same way 150 times, the AI component goes back to one of our developers and says, hey, I've seen the same thing happen 150 times. Do you want to just go ahead and automate this? And so over time, the amount of automation when you deploy these AI tools increases exponentially within your operation to reduce FTEs. So again, going back to just where are we on results today, within the first 60 days of employment, we're doing 12 FTEs worth of work, and that's with a single payer that we're going out to that payer and pulling off of the website because that payer didn't provide actionable data in the 277 responses, or even in some cases in 835 responses. The denials themselves were very generic in nature, but when we went out to the website, we could get very specific actionable information to pull down. And as I said, obviously the advantage of Sarah is you've got no downtime, no lost production and things like that. So, again, how do you improve returns here? I think there's a variety of tools you can utilize, whether it's getting smarter about how you work your inventory, how you segment it, how you divide it out among your existing staff, really starting to use automation and leveraging the tools that are available out in the marketplace to replace what used to be human work with machines simply doing the work for you, or outsourcing, right? If there's certain things you can't get to, you can't ramp up staff fast enough, or you can't hire qualified resources in your local marketplace, all those kind of things are valid reasons, for potential outsourcing. But at the end of the day, the goal is how do you maximize the net yield or the net total return on your AR? And where we typically see the biggest problems are as those accounts age out, they get touched less and less by the internal staff. I don't know, maybe there'll be a first on this call, but I've never talked to anybody who has ever said, I am 100% fully staffed, and I know with 100% confidence that I'm working every account as quickly as I possibly can, right? There's turnover, there's call-ins, there's all kinds of issues that prevent you from being able to get there and do that. but there are other very viable solutions available that you should think about and certainly explore.
And if you could actually say that with some additional level of analytics like this, you may be overstaffed. Because if you're telling me you're working every account to the T, you may be overworking some business.
Yeah. So we've got our contact information here. Again, we're going to open up to questions, and we'll be happy to stick around and answer any questions that people have. That said, if you think of something on down the road and want to follow up, feel free to follow up with us. You know, Greg and I are happy to chat with anybody further about anything that we discussed today. But thanks for the time. Appreciate everybody participating, and I'm going to turn it back over to John to open up the questions.
Jeff, let me ask you, what is a typical process for if somebody asks you to come in and kind of evaluate how they're doing things, or you know, what's your normal process of how you go in and do that evaluation to work with a potential new client?
Yeah, so at the highest level, John, typically, you know, we would bring in a couple of subject matter experts to engage with some folks at the business office, typically somebody in a leadership role over, you know, an area that they're looking to consider analyzing for different solutions, as well as somebody who's got the ability to pull data out of the host patient accounting system so we can do the analysis. So we would typically submit very kind of first thing, a list of data elements or fields that we would like to get to be able to do the analysis, but then we would go back and kind of do this analysis. So we can look at the aggregate AR and come back and say, here's where you're touching accounts or not touching accounts, and come back to you and show the segmentation of the piece of the AR that's getting missed that would be, you know, most available for additional internal attention or outsourcing. But I think the results of that initial assessment are really what opens up the dialogue for us to collaborate to figure out where to go next, whether that's, you know, deploying better data analytics or, you know, outsourcing or even, you know, driving segmentation. I mean, I'll say first and foremost, we are not a consulting firm. That being the case, we typically do a fair amount of free consulting up front because we want our customers to be educated and really feel like they're making a good decision.
And just to attach to that point, Jeff and I both have experience on the provider side, the full end-to-end revenue cycle side, and the keys I think we've learned is that to be the best partner in this consultative approach is to not necessarily say that we just want to do everything for everybody. We want to be able to take that analysis and be able to identify what are the opportunities that need to be fixed, what are the methodologies of going about that, and is there technology, analytics, additional resources or change to the way you manage your resources today, and does it make sense for us to partner in certain spots and plug in where it makes most sense?
Jeff, Greg, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.